abundance, forgiveness, very key, immortality, eternality, immortality, and Christ consciousness, that's 9, and the reciprocal universe. So this month we want to zone in preaching on the reciprocal universe, sowing and reaping. A scripture to kind of anchor for the month, and then we'll get into the ones for today that Mel shared. Galatians chapter 6, verse 7 says this: "Do not be deceived, God cannot be mocked. A person reaps what they sow." And that's it. I always say, you plant grape seeds, you're not going to get cantaloupes later. So if you plant some troublemaking seeds, you're not going to get peace later. But that's it. It's a reciprocal universe. What we put out there, it comes back. So 2 passages from the New Testament came to mind. One is a parable of Jesus, and he did most of his teaching in these parables. So it's a story. And Luke 18 says, excuse me, he was talking to some who were confident of their own righteousness and looked down on everyone else. That's what it says. To some who were confident of their own righteousness and looked down on everyone else, Jesus told this parable. 2 men went up to the temple to pray. One, a Pharisee, and the other, a tax collector. And I'll get into that. But a Pharisee is a religious leader of their time. A tax collector, if you think they're bad now, they were even worse then. I mean, really, we'll talk about that a little bit. The Pharisee stood by himself. So the Pharisee, the religious guy, stood by himself and prayed. And he said, "God, I thank you that I'm not like other people. I thank you that I'm not like robbers. I'm not like evildoers. I'm not like adulterers. I'm not like this tax collector. I fast twice a week and give 1/10 of all I get." But the tax collector, who really was wrong, stood at a distance. He would not even look up to heaven, but he beat his breast and said, "God, have mercy on me, a sinner." I tell you that this man, rather than the other, went home justified before God. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. The other reading is from Romans chapter 12, verse 3. Just one verse. He says, Paul, the Apostle Paul, "For by the grace given me, I say to every one of you, do not think of yourself more highly than you ought, but rather think of yourself with sober judgment, in accordance with the faith God has distributed to each of you." You've probably heard that before, right? And that's good, right? That's spiritual, right? Don't think more highly of yourself than you ought, right? I think that's a major theme in mainstream spirituality. That's right. Get up off your high horse. Don't think so highly of yourself. And then if someone's thinking too highly of themselves, Maybe I got to take them down a peg in the name of spirituality. If they're getting too puffed up, maybe somebody should let the air out of their tires. Spiritually speaking, of course. Lest they get too haughty. Lest they think more highly of themselves. See, I can't help it. Lest they think more highly of themselves than they ought. Somebody in Jesus' name was chop them down to size. Right? Have you ever been on the other side of that? You thought something, and then you messed around and thought just because you said it, just because you thought it, you could say it to somebody. Have you ever dared to dream something and then shared the dream with somebody, and they took it upon themselves to apply this spiritual principle to your dream? It usually comes out one way or another in the form of, who the hell do you think you are? Heck. All right, sorry. Life does this to us sometimes. It'll take you down a notch. People will do this to us sometimes. And sometimes it's a good thing. Don't get me wrong. Humility is a beautiful thing. Modesty is a beautiful thing. But I'm reminded of a quote, I think it was Phyllis Diller. She said, we spend the first 2 years teaching kids to walk and talk, and then we spend the next 16 years trying to get them to sit down and shut up. So before they can walk and before they can talk, come on, say something, make a move, say something, make a move. And then as soon as they really start talking, know your place. That's fascinating. What'd you say, Marlene? Well, I need all the help I can get here. Come on, man. Oh, yeah, right, kids, right. Seen and not heard. Absolutely, yeah. Yeah. And it's almost, see, we can say this in the name of spirituality. Does this feel familiar at all? Well, I said, don't think of yourself more highly than you ought. But it often comes like this. Don't think of yourself more highly than you ought. That's very fascinating. That's spiritual, though, right? But there is some truth to it. There is some wisdom to it. I had to explore the Greek a little bit on this one. Not literally, but I'm saying. So this is what it's saying. This is the idea that it's giving when it says, don't think of yourself more highly than you ought. What it's saying is, don't wean yourself when you still need to suckle. That's thinking more highly of yourself than you ought. But see, it just feels like something's missing. I mean, if we're talking about the balance, we're talking about the reciprocity. Yes, there's value in modesty for sure. Yes, Jesus said the meek shall inherit the earth, and it's true. But see, something happens when we stay on that side of the coin for too long. It's good to be humble. It's good to be modest. It's good to be meek. It's good to be, in your place, right? And if I stay there too long, like I said, think about the kids coming up, and as they come up, they're getting smacked back down. Humility can turn into passivity. I can be humble, but then I can be docile. I can follow directions, but then I could be sheepish. I could be resigned. I could become victimized in the name of this spirituality. Don't think of yourself more highly than you ought. And that's real. So there's value in that. But I gotta say, it must be just as important. Okay, don't think of yourself more highly than you ought. Okay, good, I got it. How about this? Don't think of yourself less highly than you ought. It's got to be somewhere in there, right? Because, okay, don't think of yourself more highly than you ought. Okay, yeah, that's right. Yeah, because I could get too haughty. I could get too arrogant. Pride comes before a fall. Yeah, I got it. But at the same time, don't think less of yourself. So yeah, don't wean when you should suckle, but also don't suckle when it's time to wean. It's just as important to say, after all, I mean, I heard it 100 different ways here. You are made in God's image. You're part and parcel. The divine light within is the divine creativity in the image of God. And all things are possible through the power of. And even in science, they say you're just using what? Maybe 10% of your brain power. You know, they show a woman when the adrenaline hits, she can lift up a car. But just walking around day by day, she can't open a can of pickles. But it's in there, though. But this is who you are. So yeah, don't think more highly of yourself than you ought. But I gotta say, don't think more lowly of yourself than you ought to. That's gotta be it. Look at it scientifically. Okay, yeah, don't think more highly of yourself than you ought. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I'm one of, because I could get haughty with it, but it's good to be reminded, no, you're just one of 8 billion people. It's good to be reminded that in 100 years, all this stuff you're worrying about in 100 years is nothing. Across the eternality of who you are, it's good to be, so don't think more highly of yourself than you ought. That's good. And then remember, you're just one person. You're on this planet. And this planet is being carried across some sort of solar winds or power across the universe, across the solar system, traveling hundreds of millions of miles every year. And then this is just one planet in the solar system of 8, 9 planets, and all around our star, the sun. But then in our galaxy, there's billions of stars, billions. In our galaxy, and it would take, even traveling the speed of light, it would take 100,000 years to get from one side of our galaxy to another. But then our galaxy, when you zoom out, it's like that. And that's just of the universe that we can see. And then they say there's got to be an infinite number of universes, a universal, this is just one universe. So, yeah, don't think of yourself more highly than you ought. Yeah, we are dust. From dust we came, and to dust we shall return. That's true. That helps me. There's an infinite number of universes, and no one will care what's going on. That helps me to not be mad at LeBron anymore for losing. But then I gotta say, at the same time, don't think more lowly of yourself than you ought. Because whether you think about it or not, all of us multiplied from one sperm and one egg to several trillion cells now, with a mental capacity, with a bone structure, with a circulation, with a creative spark, with a resilience that has never been defeated yet. You're still here. All these bad days and all this stuff we're worrying about, you apparently made it through all that to this moment. Don't think more lowly of yourself. We're having 50,000 different thoughts a day, the neurologists say, and we have the power to choose all of them. And then when you start choosing them in whatever direction the majority of them choose, that you choose or not choose, but whatever the majority of those thoughts are, they have this way of turning into your reality. That's pretty powerful stuff. So for all I know, we were told in the name of spirituality, don't you think more highly of yourself than you ought. And then let me teaching, but it's not always the same as the truth of what God is. Matter of fact, it rarely is. I'd even put myself teaching in the same boat. It's hard to capture the greatness of the power of the majesty of the mystery and then just put it in English, limited vocabulary, limited understanding. And then I probably don't even say everything I really want to say about it. You don't hear everything I say, so we got some diminishing returns here, but that's all right. But sober judgment, again, I had to go back to that Greek. We understand sobriety, right? Not intoxicated, clearly. Not drunk, not high. Also, sober-minded means serious, recognizing the gravity of things. That word sober in the Greek that's translated as sober, when it says look at yourself with sober judgment, what the word literally means is look at yourself with sanity. Can we be realistic? Can we look at ourselves with sanity? A couple examples. You want to not think of yourself more highly than you ought? Here's something. Take off all your clothes and just look in the mirror. I mean, look. Look at it. Own it. Yeah, that'll sober you up real quick. But then, now, here we go. So I take that look. Now, how many years of acculturation, of propaganda, of Slim Fast commercials, Noxzema commercials, and all the rest, supermodels, to now when I look at myself, you don't have to, if I'm looking at myself naked, you don't have to worry about thinking more highly of myself than I ought. I got to work on this other side of the coin, thinking more lowly of myself. But now, so okay, that's where I am, that's where I am. But now with sober judgment, because if I take a look at myself naked, the last thing I might want to do is stay sober. However, Don't think more lowly of yourself than you ought. Take that look with sanity. Take that look recognizing, okay, well, I guess this is what fearfully and wonderfully made looks like. Take that look. You talking all that made in God's image trash? Not trash, but you know what I'm saying. Here it is. Sober judgment. And then find something to love. And then let that love build out into the truth. Because we've been smacked down about thinking more highly of ourselves. We can lose sight. But to strike that balance, and I think we got to look at Christ, did not have too high of a thought about himself. All he said was, all power in heaven and earth is in my hands. That's all. He was right. And then he said, and whatever I have done, whatever I can do, you can do also. But then now, great aunt gonna tell you, you're getting too big for your britches. Here's another one. I noticed, I don't know, is this just our people? But one thing you cannot call our people, you better not call them broke. Broke. Yeah, financial. Okay, see, they don't even know what I'm talking about. They don't live it. You know, those are fighting words, some places you go. Why are they fighting words? Are they fighting words because it's not true? Because really, if it wasn't true, that ain't nothing to fight about. That ain't nothing to worry about. The defensiveness comes from thinking something not sober, translation, not sane, taking a real look in the mirror. I mean, if you blessed to pay the rent, mortgage, and this and that, and other phone bill, light bill, whatever, car insurance, and sometimes you get all that done, you might only have $9 to last you till the 15th. But if that's the case, that's the truth. That's the case. Can I look at myself, and I'm better off with sober judgment, with a hard look in the mirror, with an honest look. Jesus said something else. He said, you'll know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Watch how we judging others as well. So it said, yeah, with sober judgment and according to your faith. Had an interesting trip, and I appreciate all the support that was gone last week. Thank you all. But this reminded me, this story of this parable that Jesus tells. So the Pharisee, two guys go to the temple to pray, right? The Pharisee is the religious leader. They were so religious that when Jesus would say just about anything he said, they would say, no, the book doesn't say that. They had a big thing about you can't do certain things on the Sabbath. The law was you can't, if your donkey falls in a ditch on the Sabbath, you're not supposed to help it, right? And now Jesus, there was a man with a withered hand at one point, and it was the Sabbath. And Jesus healed the man. And so the Pharisees didn't say, wow, you healed a man whose hand was withered like this and you opened up his hand. They said, you know you're not supposed to do that on the Sabbath, right? Who do you think you are? And Jesus said, which one of you, if you had a donkey, if you had some cattle stuck in a ditch on the Sabbath, you're not going to wait till the next day to get your money right. You got a donkey in the ditch, you're going to get it. So Jesus didn't say it in these words, but basically he was saying, so what? So you can save your ass on the Sabbath. I can't save mine. Donkey. It's in the book. So the Pharisee, so religious, so holy, that even Jesus' preaching wasn't resonating because they too religious. Now you got the tax collector on the other side. And let me just explain that. See, it wasn't like it is now where you go to the accountant, they tell you what it is. You know, hopefully you got a good accountant. They can take care of some things. Don't ask guidance for no letter beyond what you actually did. Best way is just go ahead and do it. But it wasn't like that. It was like all these people of different nations, Israel was one of those nations. The Roman tax collector would come in and say, okay, time to collect the tax. Now, they didn't have bank accounts. They didn't have this. They didn't have that. So they come in and they just say, well, you owe this much. And they walking out with one of your animals. They're walking out with your possessions. They're walking out with something. And then the tax collector had to give that to the Roman IRS. I don't know what you call it. But their job was to turn that in. But then the tax collector said, well, dang, I got to eat too. And since I'm allowed to just come in people's houses and take what the emperor requires, whatever the emperor requires, I'm allowed to come in and take. They were known for being basically crooks. You know, they'll take whatever they wanted to, and it was real bad. And really, they knew they were wrong. So he says, look, so the Pharisee, that's the reverend doctor, comes in. And then here comes the tax collector. The reverend doctor comes in, Lord, I'm so glad I'm not like these other evildoers, these adulterers. And I'm especially glad, God, that I'm not like this tax collector. That's getting a little thinking of yourself more highly than you ought. God, I'm so glad me and you understand each other and I'm not like him. Here's a tax collector. Man, I know I'll be doing people wrong, man. I know I got into this just out of greed, and you know, I've had so many people chasing me, mad at me, and they're right. So I don't even deserve your love, God, but just a little bit of grace, a little bit of mercy. And now when you take that posture, here comes the grace. Do you see how this works reciprocally? If I'm too haughty with it, God, I'm so glad. You just know they're setting themselves up for a fall. But if I can say, man, what is my problem? Why can't I? What's going on? Now here comes a bit of grace. Here comes a bit of wisdom. Here comes a bit of understanding. Here comes a bit of compassion toward what's going on. This reminds my brother and I, who, interesting relationship, love him to death. He is what you might call, unlike myself, he's a real Christian. You know what I mean. And we had a conversation. We love each other. We could talk about it. He came up in here and he was looking around. He said, oh no, I see these symbols on the wall. He said, I don't see no Father, Son, Holy Ghost. Right? And okay, that's fine. But then last week I went to the church he was preaching. And I was sitting there and I said, see, they ain't open at the top. They're not engaging the fullness of consciousness. You know, they just stuck in this little. Ain't nobody better than the other. I say on both of our best day, we're still falling short of the greatness of this truth that we're talking about anyway. So now, in all this greatness, there's got to be some room for the humility. And even in the humility, there's got to be some space for the truth, which is the greatness also. Now, what do we look like making that comparison when the real truth is, since I'm in as God, I ought to see God everywhere. So what does that look like? Judging what a tradition looks like, judging what just based off of what someone else, what they say, rules made by man. So, Ecclesiastes 7:14 says, when times are good, rejoice. And when times are bad, consider. It is God who has made one and the other. And it says, therefore, no one knows anything about their future. So when things are good and I can't lose and I'm feeling good and everything's going right and the money's right and the compliments are flowing, that's the time to remember that you are dust. That's the time to remember. Cornel West says it like this: you are a featherless, two-legged mammal born between urine and feces. That's where you're born. I don't have to explain that one further, do I? You get it? All right. But it's true. For all the heights, for all the accolades, for all the glory, don't think more highly of yourself than you ought. And that's true. And, no, I like that Cornel West. He says, yeah. He says, one day you will be the feast of terrestrial worms. Don't think more highly of yourself than you ought. Okay, I got it. And when I get low, when I get down, when things aren't working, I don't need to hear, now I'm already down, I don't need to hear, don't think of yourself more highly than you ought. I need a reminder of the truth of this image, of the beauty of holiness, of the possibilities, of the fact that things can turn around in a moment. The good news I've been waiting for, the change I've been waiting for, the healing, this can come in an instant because of the truth of who we are. Life is striking that balance between don't think too high, please don't think too low. In meditation and a treatment here, life is dynamic. It's not just one or the other. You, loved ones, sometimes got to be built up. And sometimes not torn down, but given a sober, sane view. That's all it is. It's the same view. It's not, sometimes you're down, you need to be up. Sometimes you're up, you need to be down. It's in all things, let's have a sane, sober, true, faithful view of what is really going on. If it's a time of physical illness, a sane, sober look says, My human body is endowed with a natural healing property. Last time I got a paper cut, it comes back together, it works out. May that same principle be at work, and not even may it is at work. I'm allowing it, I'm increasing. And now with the power of my thoughts, let me concentrate on that. Let me go there. Same for the finances, same for the relationship, same for the. And then I say, wow, that worked. Guess what, y'all? I'm a healer. Bring them here. Now let me take a sane look and say, none of this except for me is in my hands anyway. I can't claim to be able to do something for someone else. But let me take this power and let me work it for myself. Not too high, not too low. Like Goldilocks said, this was too hot, this one's too cold. Very powerful myth. This one is just right. Let that be our path today and in the days to come. Sowing the seeds of sanity, reaping a harvest of the fullness of God. Amen. Ashe. So it is.
Special way, and as I praise you, I lift you up, I magnify your name. That's why my heart is filled with praise. I love you, I love you, I love you, Lord, today.